I think one of the things people might be wondering, we watch a lot of things going on around the world. We rarely have things going on in Ferguson that are going out around the world. How is it that a national news organization or an international news organization who wants to do a serious job of reporting tackles the sort of the complexities of the spot news versus the issues at stake?
So I think one of the things that most international or national organizations are concerned about is what can I trust in the field, even though there is an avalanche of information that's coming across social media. What's verifiable? How are there multiple sources confirming the same thing? Who are the sources that are actually sending this information out? I mean, what you saw in this particular case is that for the first couple of days after Michael Brown, I mean, social media had already been there. And ironically, the first bylines that came out of the New York Times or anywhere, they were from the Chicago offices, right? So somebody was kind of monitoring the situation on the ground, but the national media actually didn't show up there for a couple of days, while it was already very relevant and important to the community there.
Yeah, this really changes how you guys do your jobs. I mean, and actually local reporters as well. But in the one hand, you're getting so much more information so much faster, but how do you decide? The curating of that information must be quite a challenge.
It is, and I think that it goes back to who do you trust? And oftentimes it's much better to trust the people that you have working for you in your own newsroom. If not, then you kind of expand that circle out into, okay, this is a reporter from the New York Times that sent this out, or this is a reporter from the Washington Post who says he's been arrested. People who understand the value of trust and how difficult it is to earn that and how easily that can be blown. So I think that's, what those particular firsthand reports of the reporters when they were jailed, you said, okay, these are people who understand the gravity of lying about this, and they're not lying about it, and here they are giving us a perspective that we could never have had before.
I mean, there are some people, I think, who might be purposely putting out disinformation as opposed to people who just didn't get it right because they're not trained professionals. But let me ask you something deeper, and you guys have like local PBS stations, national PBS is expected to sort of take a different approach to this. Tell me about the kind of debate that you would have in terms of saying, what's the story here beyond tear gas and protesters?
So I think that, as you've probably seen on the NewsHour over the past week and a half, our reaction hasn't been to flood the zone with a dozen reporters and go cover the protests each night. We've been a little bit more insightful, I think. We've been analytical. We've talked to different voices from the law enforcement community, from the community that's in Ferguson right now, and we've tried to look at, well, why is this blown up the way it has? And what's the conversation about race in America that this is kind of dredging up in certain ways? Who are some of the primary characters in this, and why are they where they are in the positions that they're in? So, I mean, our approach has been very different about it. And even with the people that we've sent to the area, they're not there to cover the protest at 10:30 at night. I mean, because some part of that gets a little rutinous, and it's also last night when you saw that there were people in the community who were actually urging the journalists to go home and saying, listen, you're actually a part of the problem. You're getting in the way between the volunteers who are keeping the peace and then some of the local law enforcement that's trying to do the same thing. You're so anxious to get that shot of a piece of glass being thrown or something that you're almost begging somebody to do it because they want the attention and they know what can happen if this perfect shot of a Molotov cocktail gets all over the world.
Yeah, we had a previous conversation about Newtown, and we talked about how do you get into a community, how do you fairly portray a community, and of course, again, this doesn't happen to most communities. It may, once in a lifetime, if ever, where they're flooded with people who are trying to portray a community. And of course, from the local aspect, that's where people say, well, that's not who we are, that's not who we are. But then the question is, maybe it kind of is who you are, and there's a more complicated picture than any of us really knows.
Well, I mean, look at the demographics of how that community has changed. I mean, there was actually a little app that the NewsHour had built where you could compare the ethnic diversity and breakdown of high schools in almost any state, any city, based on Department of Education numbers. And since 1993 to now, mean, it's lost 53% of the white population, gained 40% of the black population. And that's just a small slice, but it gives you a snapshot of how the community has changed if the schools are a reflection. And then you ask the question, well, how's the police department changed? And you find a very different answer.
Tell me, and this will be my last question, and probably not the easiest question. Why, in your opinion, does a story like this resonate so much, strike so many chords? Is it because this is who America is, and this happens every few years, and then it goes away? Give me sort of that perspective from your perspective as covering lots of national issues, talking about race for a long time. Why this? Why now? Why does it resonate? Besides the fact that it makes good pictures for TV.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of things that could make good pictures for TV, but don't stick around nearly as long as this has, right? And I think one of the reasons is because that there is a huge population that feels completely disenfranchised, not only from engagement with law enforcement, but just really about their own opportunity. So it goes back to some of our kind of reporting on inequality as much as about the economy, and so many situations where people just say, and the reason that they took to social media was because these are not the people who were asked by mainstream media the questions on how life is. And a lot of the people that were in Ferguson in these protests said, look, you guys just got a sliver of what the St. Louis PD does to us, because this is what the camera's rolling. Imagine what happens when you all leave, right? So I think that these kind of deep-seated misgivings that the community had about itself and each other blew up in a way that, I mean, social media certainly fueled that fire, and it amplified that message loud and clear. But I mean, there's nothing to say that, whether it's Trayvon Martin's shooting or whether it's Michael Brown's life. I mean, a life isn't worth something different in each case. I mean, there are horrible situations like this that happen all over, but it's kind of the right confluence of events that really emboldens the community. And so does the technology, emboldens that community to start speaking out and saying, this is not just, and this is just a sliver of the deep problems my community has.